Welcome to Fraction of a Teacher, the podcast where two trainee maths teachers share our journey from changing careers into the wild world of teaching. I'm Francis.
And I'm Jen. Join us as we reflect and just have a laugh about life in the classroom. So whether you're thinking about starting a career in education, you're already a trainee teacher in the thick of it all, or you're just curious what it takes to shape young minds, you are definitely in the right place. So let's dive in.
Hi, Jen. Welcome back. Great to see you again. Great to chat. And we are really near the half term now. So, only a few more days teaching before we get a little break. And then the final half term of our training. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. It was my birthday last weekend, so
Happy
I was off
birthday.
celebrating. Thank you. But it was off celebrating my birthday. But yes, gosh, where's the time gone? Really?
It's staggering how quickly we've got to this point where I think we've got about 4.5 weeks left in school. And then if it all goes well, we'll become qualified teachers in less than 2 months, which just, it has come around so ridiculously fast. Everything since sort of Christmas has been quick, which I suppose, it's got us thinking, hasn't it, about like where were we a year ago and how on earth has it disappeared in a year?
Yeah, definitely. Can we just say again, thank you so much to Adam for coming on. What a great guest. We had so much fun recording that. But that definitely started the reflections about how far we've come. And we met back in September last year. Look where we are now.
No, that was really fun. And it's funny because so much of what we talked about in that conversation, it's all things we've learned, we've experienced, we've seen over the last few months. It's amazing how much this changes you and how much the new experiences, different perspectives. It's been good fun.
So we're going to be reflecting a little bit on our route, our entrance to the PGCE, why we chose the PGCE, looking back to our past selves and almost giving ourselves a little bit of, if we went back to this time last year, what would we wish we'd done differently? Would you say that's pretty fair?
Yeah, advice to ourselves, and did it all work out the way we'd sort of hoped it would? And I think it's funny. I think that I've been talking to a few friends recently about going into teaching, and some people who I know who are seriously contemplating doing what we've done, which is a career change, and taking up training to be a teacher. And it's quite a big leap. And I've been talking to them about my thought process. I went through it, and them looking at, for them, what does that mean? I suppose there'll be a few of those points we discussed. I've been discussing with them to come up, and definitely looking back, what would I tell myself if it was me a year ago? What's the advice?
Isn't that crazy? This is a year ago. A year ago now, we would literally be applying for our PGCs and doing all our prep work, and now we're here. And I think all I can say to people at this stage is it goes quick. It goes very, very, very fast. Should we do a quick starter? I've got one in my head. Are you good for me to kind of just throw something at you?
If it's something like I think it is, then let's do it anyway and see what happens.
Okay, so I've had a lot of purchases over my PGC year to try and help me, like, along the way. What's been your favorite, most valuable purchase in terms of your PGCE, and why?
The thing I've used most has been my thermos flask. It's been It's been like having a picnic every day. But going down to uni, the price of the coffees at uni and the lack of time available to make a coffee at work, I have used the thermos flask so much. It's been great. So, that's my cost and time-saving tip for anyone going into teaching. Thermos full of coffee when you leave the house, and then you'll never be short of a hot drink mid-morning. That was my... It's nothing much to do with teaching. But what about you? You've probably got something much cleverer again.
So I think my most valuable purchase was definitely my planner. I got it from a company called Think Tidy, and it was amazing. Used it for everything, and it saved my life.
It had everything that I would need in it as a trainee. So like my mentor meetings are in there. It gave me loads of space to write everything down, and it had the teaching standards in there as well. So I had them at hand, and it gave me space to mind map a lot of my thoughts out. I had my assignment due dates in there. And I think as a trainee teacher, without that, I would have had paper everywhere. Lost without it. And they are not sponsoring this, but they are amazing at what they do. My planner was my go-to for absolutely everything.
They are beautiful planners, actually.
You've seen it, haven't you? You've seen my planner.
Yeah, they're very cool. And I'm looking on their website now. I can see that, and we're genuinely not public.
No, we're not sponsored by them.
Not yet. But no, they look fantastic. Okay, so I think armed with a planner and some coffee, you can do anything. That's what we're saying. That's the message for today.
That's where we're going to start. So before you start your PGCs, everyone, get yourself a good coffee flask and get yourself a specific trainee teacher planner. I'm all for it.
Absolutely. So we're asked a year ago. We're there with a planner and flask on our desk. What was it that led you to training the route we did? So we were both doing a PGCE with the university, which should lead to us getting qualified teacher status, QTS, and a postgraduate certificate in education, the PGCE. But what was it that what was the sort of thought process, the route that you went through to get to choosing this course?
Okay, so I feel like there's going to be a lot of name dropping of companies. And again, we're not sponsored by anybody, so we're just going to put that caveat in there for right now. But I kept seeing a poster on the side of a motorway or a billboard, and it said, thinking about getting teaching, or do you want to be a teacher? And it was Get Into Teaching, the government organization. And I messaged them and was like, I'm thinking about getting teaching. I don't really know where to start. What can you do? And I was assigned a lady named Harriet, who helped me with everything, looked for courses, read over my personal statement, checked in and gave me some interview prep questions, actually checked in afterwards about how I felt about it. Just gave me absolutely everything. And then without her, I think I would have still been lost. So my prep started with getting into teaching and Harriet. From there, I then looked at PGCE courses and did some research into what course I wanted to attend and what aspects of the course would really benefit me. And I would say at this stage, one of my key factors of the course that we chose was the fact that when I looked at it, they did it a week in a primary school, coming from America at the age of 15. So I entered the UK schooling at year 10. I would have really benefited from knowing what kids had learned from a younger age. So that was really crucial for me as a training teacher. And that was one of the key factors that led me to interview for my PGCE course where we were. I didn't even consider a different topic. It was math, always going to be math. So it was just what course I wanted to go for then. And I actually relocated. So I was in Norfolk at the time. And I actually relocated to the South Coast because I wanted a change and I wanted to be closer to my family who live on the South Coast as well. So I just had to find out which course was for me.
Wow. And then did you apply for many? Did you do many interviews or just the one in the end?
So I applied for 3 universities.
Yeah.
I went to one interview, which is obviously the university that we had. I immediately wanted to accept it. I did. And then actually, I'm going to go back a step. So I actually interviewed in September for the 2023 cohort of my course. So I had less than 2 weeks before the course was starting.
So that would have been a year before we actually started.
Yeah. I actually had an online interview with our PGC coordinator, and he gave me a math test to go away, come back and do. And he had a really frank conversation with me that he wanted to give me a place, but I wasn't ready. And I need to go away. I need to do an SKE course, which is a skills, knowledge, and enhancement course to get my math up to place. Because in 6 weeks' time, I would be entering a school if I started this year, and I wouldn't be ready. And I could possibly fall flat on my face. And he was really honest with me, and I appreciated it. And I already knew I wanted to work with him because it wasn't about turning me away or having bums on seats for him. He was like, I want to make teachers who stick. And I really appreciate that. So as soon as I could open for the next year, I reapplied, I was interviewed, I was successful, and I canceled my other interviews. And I knew exactly where I wanted to go. And that was a very quick process for me after that. So by October, I had secured my place, but then I had to do all my prep, which we'll come to. But that was my journey.
Wow. So actually, I think that links really closely to something I was going to say about, for me, so much of it comes down to people. And I think there's a lot of people will say that university route's beneficial because it's got that sort of academic content up at the beginning, that you're going to have 2 placements of more equal length and so on. Or others would argue that actually the SCIT, the school-centred initial teacher training, has got real benefits in the school from the start of term, because you and I haven't seen that start of the September term. That's something we just haven't experienced yet. That actually having that sort of the academic spread over the year has got benefits reflecting with your peers each week. So I think there's a lot of arguments for each route, and I applied for one of each. And I initially thought I would like to do the SCIT. I thought being in school immediately would suit my, I wanted sort of hands-on approach. I want to get teaching. But actually, one of the key things that made me decide on the route we did choose with uni was the people. And I think the work, finding that the people who ran the course at the university we chose really came across incredibly well. They came across as pragmatic, realistic, and obviously, whilst a lot of their work was grounded in the theory, really experienced on the practical side as well. And I thought, actually, those were the people I could work really well with. And for me, the other bit was sort of practicalities with 3 kids and needing to drop them off at school, pick them up, and not be too distant for school placements. I was really keen to find a route that would be relatively close to home and allow me to do that. And again, that was something that came across in the discussions we had with the place we chose, that actually that was going to be possible, and we could make it work, and it was going to be a good 2-way discussion about the placements. So yeah, I think that would be my tip, is meet the people, and if you're getting a good feeling for the people who run the training, I think that's a really, really good sign, and that for me would be a key thing to judge it on.
I would 100% agree with what you're saying. I think there's definitely the relationship and the honesty I had from our coordinator that meant that I felt like I was in safe hands. And the PGCE course, I knew it'd be double the work, but I've studied for a master's before, so I kind of was ready for the level of work that was going to be required. And I value that dedicated lecture time of understanding those really, we talk about the acronym and the minefield, but actually understanding those really key terms like pedagogy, curriculum, how to plan a lesson, how to structure a lesson. I didn't even heard of Rosenshine before we had started. And I'm sure I would have done, but that was one of our first math lessons, and having to structure a lesson plan and put that together. No, I would have to go straight into teaching and do that, but I think I really valued that safe space of the PGCE where I was almost able to try things out and do like a micro teach, and have our math coordinator is a very experienced teacher, and he just kind of tells you how it is. And I really enjoy that about him, because whilst he's always encouraging, knowing that I've done that before, I've walked into a classroom, I couldn't have asked for more.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think that was a steady progression from actually the first few days up to a couple of micro teachers, as you say, to our peers, and then getting to school. It just felt like the right steepness of learning curve. I think I originally thought I'd really enjoy the skit, where my understanding in most skits is that you'll spend a day each week sort of covering the academic elements, so you and the other trainees. And I thought that could be really great in a way, because every 4 days of teaching in a week, and then the opportunity to spend some time with your peers and talk and reflect. What I think that wouldn't necessarily have given me, which I've really valued from the uni course, is there was a great point where we finished our first school placement in December, and then in January we spent 4 weeks back at uni. And actually having 4 weeks with no lesson planning, but without being in the school environment, with no sort of focus on anything other than your own professional development, was fantastic. We were able to talk with each other in a way that, and do some reading around the subject in a way that we wouldn't, I'd have found very difficult to do in school. I think the weeks that I've been in school, there's quite a lot to do. Focus on making sure I'm ready to deliver the best lessons to my pupils. And therefore, I don't think I'd be able to concentrate if every week I was in school for 4 days. I don't think I'd be very good at concentrating on the sort of more academic side, and the reflection. At the back of my mind would be, I need to prep all my lessons for Monday. Actually, that's where I need to be. So that dedicated time away from school between the 2 placements was great. And conversations we were having then had moved on a lot. I think in September we were all full of opinion because we decided to become teachers, but none of us really had much experience. What was awesome in January is that we were all able to come with so much experience, both to the maths and the broader professional studies, and really benefit from the shared experience of a handful of us on the maths course, but a huge number of people across a wide range of subjects. And that was really fun, hearing everyone's experiences back in January. So no, that was definitely good fun.
Yeah. And that's something that I've also taken from the fact that during our uni days, we have professional studies, which is where across every subject that our university has. And then on the next day, we are just in our subject specific groups. Looking back now, I definitely value that more than I would have ever given consideration beforehand, because being able to talk to Adam in history, and have their perspective of not just their subject, but why they got into teaching, like the arts, and how much they want to share their passion with people. And understanding that really makes me look at my colleagues. Now I'm in a school very differently, and I make sure I foster those relationships because of what I've had on the PGCE course. And I don't know if I would have had that a different route.
Definitely been fun. And then we spent a couple of sessions with the science teachers, haven't we? Like working closely with them, trying to make sure we understand what they're teaching, where there's an overlap between their curriculum and ours, and how we teach it, when we teach it. And yeah, some of that has been really valuable. Building up that broader schema, that broader picture and understanding, almost like a kind of literally sort of mind map of what's going on in teaching, I think has been really well supported through the training we've done.
I've got a question for you.
We're probably getting
Sorry.
a bit. No, go for it. I was going to say we're probably getting quite far down the line now. We can probably step back again to our former selves. But go for it. What was your question?
Well, that was my question. My next question for you was, okay, you've chosen your PGCE, you've gone for the interview. Did he say he'd like to have you during your interview?
We had a chat about the level of maths knowledge, and in the end, I was offered an unconditional place. He was content with my level of maths knowledge. But what was good was we discussed where you need to be in terms of your subject-specific knowledge for the start of the course. One of the things the government offer is subject knowledge enhancement, which delivered by a variety of companies, SKE, and you're paid a little bit for completing that. And that was something in the end, the course coordinator was content that I didn't need to do the SKE, but it was potentially something that might have been part of a conditional offer. But I think you did do an SKE, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a conditional offer because my math knowledge was not where it needed to be. So I had a very similar experience to you. I got to the end of my interview and he was like, I would love to offer you a place, but the condition that you do the SKE. So I knew that was going to be a thing. I did my GCSEs in 2003. So I was out of practice. So I was happy to do that. And there's different levels. So there's a 4, 8, 12, 16, or 32 week SKE. I think it's 32. That might be out of date. I apologize if it is. And I actually opted for the 12 weeks because I wanted a little bit more time to do it. I did that on purpose because I wanted to give myself more time to feel like I was truly prepared on terms of all of the topics. When you look at the math curriculum, there's a lot. And I didn't necessarily think that 8 weeks would have prepared me to the point where I could walk into any classroom not knowing what the scheme of work was with confidence and not spend 3 hours planning my lesson.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think we may have touched on this before, that so much of it's about bandwidth. If you're teaching, you've only got so much capacity to when you're stood at the front of the class, and if most of that capacity is used up thinking about the maths, you've got very little left for everything else, like the pedagogy, assessment, behaviour management, and so on. So I think there's definitely a kind of minimum level you need to get to be comfortable with it. And now, what was the SKE like as a sort of training?
Actually, I really enjoyed it. I will say it was very much self-directed. So the one I did was recommended by my university. And it was like a vid learn. So they gave you I would say, a very dense hour-long video of a topic. And then you were to go away and do 25 hours a week of work around that, and you would log your hours and then present information back. So make some slides, do a reflective piece, and then they would comment on your work. I chose to do a little bit of A-level in there as well, and that was something that me and the course coordinator had kind of talked about, me doing a little bit of A-level just to kind of extend my knowledge as well. Because again, you log on, you do it, and then to get the bursary for it, you have to do a certain amount of hours a week. It's like 24 hours a week. So you watch the video. I used to watch it in chunks. So my process was to watch it in chunks, go write some slides about how I would teach it. And then from there, I would go do practice papers on it to almost practice my own skills. And then I would take that lesson and give it to a teacher friend of mine, as in teach it to her. And she would give me feedback on it. And then I would adapt those slides and then rewatch the stuff. So I had a bit of a routine about that because I think that gave me a little bit more knowledge. So I've actually used a lot of my slides that I did in my SKE. But even in my slides, I did a bit of work on differences between American vocabulary and English vocabulary and notation. And I was picked up on being very aware of that because that was something that I'm going to have to continue to be mindful of. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and I still have all my SKE work.
That is really useful to understand. Your SKE then, you completed that, and then that was met the condition of your offer, and you're in.
Yeah.
And have you learnt to call a trapezium, not a trapezoid?
What, trapezoid?
Trapezoid. Is that how you?
Trapezoid. Trapezoid.
Have you learnt? You're all over this now, are you?
If I have a say higher attaining set, I will play with some of the language and be like, in America we call this trapezoid. I've gone on a few videos on YouTube and showed them people using American terminology and being like, what do you think they mean? Because this is mathematics, and actually showing them there is a crossover. So sometimes it's really helpful to kind of have that fluidity to understand that you can recognize that trapezium may also be called a trapezoid. It's the same with language. I call it an eggplant, you call it an aubergine. To understand that that's the same thing, even when you go abroad, you need to understand. And it's about having that knowledge. Never thought we'd be talking about eggplants on the podcast, but hey, there's a first time for everything.
That's good. Tomato. I think it's good to be kind of bilingual. But I did find a good worksheet the other day that said trapezoid, and I thought, I've just been really going on about the name trapezium. I can't use this worksheet. Okay. So you're doing the SKE, and did you visit many schools like in that kind of journey between thinking maybe I want to be a teacher and starting the PGCE? How did you go about that?
So I did, and I would say to anybody out there, get into a school before you start. One, because you can log it as your hours for your SKE. So I would spend 3 days in. Those 24 hours I logged as part of my week, mostly because I was reflecting on it, what I'd learned. I was looking at real life lesson plans. I was having lesson plans in front of me and then watching teachers teach and trying to almost like learn that process, talking to teachers about pedagogy, their curriculum, their scheme of work, like just customizing myself to that language that it felt so alien to me. My top tip, just to be in there, get around children, be in the classroom and start desensitizing yourself to being around a lot of kids a lot of the time. And Francis, I feel like you might agree with me on this one, the volume of noise that kids bring.
And the intensity of, I think, the fact that you're pretty much always on show. You're pretty much always, there's no real kind of respite. It's full on from the moment you walk through the gates to the moment you leave. I think that's quite a good thing to sort of, because if it's not for you, then don't do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even being there and watching teachers perform, and I think Adam put this really well about, like, especially with Key Stage 3, like last week, Adam was talking about performing. I think watching them do it with ease, and it felt like it was easy. It's very different when you're up there. And there's so many hints and tips I picked up. When to use whiteboards. It's really good to see what teachers are doing nowadays and just start taking that information in, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you're thinking about teaching, go and visit 2 or 3 schools. It really helps, either knowing it will or it really won't be for you. What really surprised me was how, I can't remember if we talked about this previously, how much pupils are really kind of inviting when there's guests and how honest they were. And it amazed me, like when they were doing independent practice in maths classes, when I was visiting schools, considering going into teaching, you'd go and talk to a pupil and you say, how are you getting on? And the number who would just look at you and say, I don't know what's happening at all. I haven't got a clue. And I was like, wow, that is amazingly honest. You know, having come from a work environment where that generally wasn't the culture. And also how you could then like work with them and just ask them a couple of questions and help them, and how they'd be like, oh, thanks, sir. You help, they'd go to the point where they did understand it. And I think seeing how much of a difference you could make relatively quickly, that was what really made me want to absolutely kind of guaranteed that I really did want to do teaching.
Absolutely. And so did you spend time in a school before you started the PGCE?
So I visited, I think, 3 or 4 schools in the end and spent a day in each. And that was really good. And it helped me see how different schools work. It was really great experience.
Okay, so I do have a question for you on that though. How did you get in touch with your schools? Did you just email them, or did you know somebody who worked there? Because I think this is a really important for people who don't have anybody in contact with school, because I'm coming from a bit of a different place. My cousin is a math teacher, so I decided to come down and do a few days in her school. So that was how I had arranged that. How about yourself?
That's a good question, actually. A couple of the schools were people I knew who worked in the schools. But I went to, you mentioned Get Into Teaching, the government's organisation for helping encourage people to come into teaching and support them in that sort of applications. I went to an event they organised, actually, and got chatting to various organisations, one of which was an academy chain that were looking for trainee teachers, and they were really, really welcoming. Again, comes back to that people thing, and they said, yeah, they'd love to have a host. And I said, look, I probably can't apply to your school. It's just too far away from home. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it work. And they said, don't worry, we'd love to have you down, come down for the day and see you around the school. So that was amazing. That was great. So I think the Get In Teaching event was really worth going to. And actually, via the Get In to teaching, advisor who I was assigned from the government's getting teaching team, they said to me if I was having any trouble finding schools to visit, they'd be able to assist as well. So it feels like there are a few ways of getting visits to schools arranged. So really worth doing as early as possible. And I think the other thing it gave me was, I'm not sure about you, but during the interview or the interviews for the training, they were definitely very keen and interested to hear how I visited schools and what did I think from my visits to schools, because I suppose that's part of making sure you've understood what it is you're getting into and that you understand what the role involves.
And I think my visits to school, one of the key questions I feel like it really enhanced was, what do you think the role of a teacher is? And actually being in a school and seeing it's not, I don't just stand up in front of a class and teach math. You know, at one point in time, you're a safeguarding officer. There's so many hats that we wear as teachers throughout the day. You're a form tutor. Seeing that and having those conversations and watching people in the profession talk about their experience of the PGCE, talk about what they've learned, their top tips and next steps after ECT, you know, those terms, because I've heard like different terminologies, for them to help me dispel some of those almost naiveties.
Definitely. Visits to schools, think about the different routes, talk to people. What else? I did watch a couple of TV programs which had links to teaching. One about Michaela School in London, I think it's called Britain's Toughest Headmistress. And that was quite good. Again, just getting a feel for different types of schools, different types of styles of schools and teachers. So I think little bits of exposure. I listened to a couple of podcasts by teachers. And again, it was just part of trying to, I suppose, get used to some of the language that's used, get used to the way that teaching's talked about. I didn't know what pedagogy was, you know, it's the basic stuff like that was probably quite useful, just having a bit of a background in before turning up on day one of the course in September.
I was also watching TV shows like Educating Britain. And I know it's probably some of it is made for entertainment purposes, but actually just sitting there and thinking, what would I do in that situation, really started to prepare me for the types of questions and that could come up, and you know, how quickly can things change. And I think some things you don't always see behind that. And I think that's really important. I kind of wish I'd listened to more podcasts, though, I will say. You know, I wish we existed. I think you should listen to our podcast.
Particularly fractional teacher, that's the one I definitely recommend.
Yeah, I mean, those two trainee teachers. But yeah, I just think Educating Britain it really made me excited to be in a classroom and really just like start thinking about some of those scenarios where when you get into teaching, they always ask you a safeguarding question. It's starting to make you think quite fluidly about teaching. But actually, I wish I'd maybe known a little bit more about the keeping kids safe in education framework, because I feel like I could have really digested that a lot more. I have read it, one, because it's a statutory requirement, but I would have loved to spend more time with that.
Yeah, and I think there are definitely a few bits, again, back to that kind of terminology and background knowledge. From what I remember, the university sent out a bit of a reading list for the few weeks before, and that was quite good in terms of a few key documents. Some of them more sort of practical and applied, and some of them a bit more sort of theory-based, but that was quite useful. Again, just as a little bit of background. I was thinking about, I really read any kind of books about teaching, particularly before I started the course, and many of them I think probably made more sense for me to read once I started the course and once I knew a bit more about it. But anything you can do that just gives you exposure, even if it's just dipping into books about teaching, magazine articles. TES, Times Educational Supplement, their website, which has got a lot of sort of current news and topical items regarding teaching, again, it's quite good. And just getting a feel for what this new profession is and what's going on in that profession probably was a bit of exposure across all of those is helpful. But I don't think you need to do too much. And that's one of the things I think was really nice in our course, was that they wanted to kind of take all of us in and then build from the sort of basics upwards starting in September. And that was one of the nice things about having those 3 weeks in university at first, which I suppose allowed us to do that before we went into school.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I've got a question for you. What's one thing about your previous career that do you feel has really helped you be such a great teacher?
Well, I don't know if I'm that great. I still have fraction.
Always.
I think it's, yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. It's something to do with dealing with people. I think I feel really lucky to have found a second career that's the common link is from my first one. Is it's just about people. It's about trying to read how others are, feeling, how they're reacting to what you're doing and adjusting what you're doing accordingly. And I think that's what so much of teaching's about, being adaptive in the moment, because it is a people job. That's all it is, really.
100%.
I mean, your previous career had so much not only working with people and reading people really challenging situations and people in challenging circumstances. Is that your kind of common factor, or have you got something else?
I'd say a part of it. I think definitely, like you say, about being able to keep your cool under any circumstance. I would definitely say being able to engage in reflective practice and having that deeper understanding where you're not reflecting on a surface level, you're able to go deeper and really think about what this means, how this affects your work, what you're going to do with it next. That definitely helped me. And it felt like second nature to me. And I really enjoyed that, where I've spoken to a few colleagues and they really struggled with the idea of reflecting proactively rather than reactively on a situation that didn't go well. And that takes some adjusting, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think I would. I have to admit that it's not something I'd really thought about in this way before. It was definitely quite a lot new to me in that. It's one of those models of reflection. A lot of it makes a lot of sense, though, and actually, I think when you start to see it having like a positive impact on your work, that's awesome.
And I think it absolutely has a place in the teaching standards, which it does. But I don't necessarily think I would have known that before it was told to me in the first few weeks.
Yeah, I agree, and I think all training providers will, no doubt, there'll be a lot of reflective practice within that. But I think our course, in a positive way, feels quite heavily. Yeah, there's quite a sort of heavy focus on reflection. And again, I think that it's those little differences that will make a bit of a difference for someone who's choosing between different training providers. Awesome.
So I think just before we get to our plenary, I think I just want to say, I want to give a little bit of acknowledgement to the fact that if you do decide to do a PGCE course, you are going to be working full-time as a teacher with lesson plans and also be doing a full-time education course. Be ready for the paperwork. Would that be fair to say, Francis?
It's pretty busy. And it is linked. There are really clear links between some of the theory things and the big assignments and what you're doing in the classroom. But for me, it does take almost a different sort of part of my brain. I need to be focused on lesson plans for later in the week is a different sort of skill set to running a master's level essay about reflection. One of the challenges sometimes is just jumping between those and making sure you're sort of spinning these different plates. But no, it's definitely busy. I do think one of the benefits is that sort of feels like a bit of a sprint and then a bit of recovery, with each half term and getting a bit of downtime where you're not in school for those sort of holidays and half terms. So I think that's definitely a big sprint each week, bit of a break at the weekends, and then pacing yourself through those sort of half terms and holidays. But yeah, it's busy.
Yeah. And I think it's about having those good habits. We've talked a lot about atomic habits and actually having those good habits, because we will say in the PGCE, again, one of the big things that attracted me to the PGCE is that you have 2 placements and the placements are of equal length. So you actually get 2 different style schools. And our mentor specifically picked 2 contrasting schools to give us different experiences. And that really does test you as a teacher. When you're kind of thinking about your PGCE course, be ready for the changes and the adaptability. You're going to have to learn. So you just have to be ready for everything. So definitely. But it's also the benefit because you're not there for the whole year. So you pass that placement and you move on to a different school. And you might love it, you may hate it, but you definitely quickly learn what kind of school you want to be in or not want to be in. And I think that's such a valuable kind of part of the PGC.
Definitely. And I think I underestimated how different the schools would be. I think you get quite comfortable. I got quite comfortable in my first placement school, and then I had to get used to being a bit uncomfortable again, getting used to the second school. But I think you're right too. It's great to have those 2 kind of reference points for then when you're trying to work out where do you want to work in your first sort of full-time role as an early career teacher.
Absolutely. So plenary, I've got a question for you. My question for you is, what do you wish you had asked on your interview that would have helped you now you're on the course?
Great question. I think for me it's about just understanding that overall picture of you've got the course starting in September through to end of June, early July. What are those? Making sure I understand that sort of structure. Where am I going to be each week? I've got a block at uni, another block at school, block back at uni, and then understanding within those uni blocks what the sort of balance was between subject-specific maths work and working in that broader professional studies with the other subjects, because I've really enjoyed that. And I think knowing a little bit about which other subjects you'll be working with, because a lot of training providers don't have all the subjects. So yeah, I think just that overall picture of what the course is going to be like is useful information to have, particularly as you're beginning to prepare for it, plan your life around it with other commitments and so on. What about you? Hopefully I haven't stolen yours. What's yours?
Love that. Yeah, do you know what? I kind of definitely can see the benefit of that. Okay, so that kind of leans quite nicely into mine. I think I would have liked to have asked, how many people are on the course this year. So like how many he took in 2023, 2024 cohort. And was that going to be a similar number now? And looking back now, there's only 9 of us, small group, and being given that one-to-one time with our coordinator. And when I say 9 of us, I mean there's 9 of us on our math cohort. There's roughly, I think we started with around 80, 90 on our complete course for the secondary subjects. But having that time with our coordinator almost really, I think, built my confidence because he was there. He always had time. I imagine if I had or was on a course of 25, 30 people, I don't know I would feel as ready for ECT life as I do right now. Because you know how you said about the other day about the 6 students and you could really just look over their work, compare work.
Yeah.
Having that, and we've actually crossed schools a lot, and having that kind of relationship. We have a WhatsApp chat. I think that's been so valuable to me in terms of developing those relationships, feeling like I wasn't just a number, developing my identity as a teacher.
Yeah, you're right. That group size, I think often so teams work best in that 6 to 12 people, and I think a group size about that size is just brilliant. And everything we've done in the subject groups has been worked really well, all those activities and discussions, because it's big enough. You've got a variety of views and experience, but it's small enough that everyone feels they have the opportunity to contribute. So yeah,
Valued.
that's a good point, actually. That definitely is worth understanding. And that'll be different for different people, but yeah, I think for both of us, this has been just right.
So I've really enjoyed with kind of looking back on our younger selves, ourselves a year ago.
Well, we were younger.
Yeah, we were younger. And just really thinking about what I would do differently or kind of what I wish I knew. But I've enjoyed every minute of this. I know we're in our probably most stressful time right now, but I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, it's been good. And it's funny, you look back and realize how far you've come. Because I think at the start of the course, you know, the idea of being up to about sort of 80% of a full-time teacher's workload, teaching load now, that seemed like a pretty big goal. And, you know, the first lesson I planned took me, I don't know, 3.5 hours or something. I couldn't imagine planning, 16 lessons a week. And the fact that you then get there and actually doesn't feel, okay, it's busy, but it doesn't feel nearly as hideous as it sounded at the beginning of the year. You realise that you are making progress. Things are really going in the right direction.
Definitely.
No, it's quite nice when you look back and see where you come from, where you're going.
Absolutely. I'll put that on a postcard.
Well, on that note, I have a great week, great rest of your week, and look forward to catching up shortly.
Oh, you too, buddy. Always a pleasure to see you and catch up and talk about things. So I will see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fraction of a Teacher. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed recording it. Please share a link with your fellow teachers and friends. We release new episodes every second Thursday morning, UK time.
And if you do love it, I suggest you hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and follow us on social media at Fraction of a Teacher Podcast for updates so you never miss anything. We do love hearing from you with your questions, your thoughts, and your ideas. So if you have any, please email us at fractionoat@gmail.com. Until next time, keep smiling.
And keep solving those problems.